Good evening, Ulrich.
Hello.
How did you first hear about Krishnamurti?
Well, there were actually two people who told me about him, but what they told me, didn't really impress me very much. But then, soon later, I discovered a book at university. I was at that time a student in education, and I discovered a book, Education and the Significance of Life. So this book really impressed me. And actually, at the end of the year, when the professor asked all the students to make a short presentation about any topic on education, I chose this book. And then after that, I met Giselle from Geneva, who was interested in Krishnamurti, and she mentioned that he gave talks in Saanen, and other people mentioned it too. So that's how I get into contact with him.
So you first read a book and then you heard him speak in sign.
Yes. So then for about 20 years I went to Saanen almost every year.
Did you continue reading books?
During that time?
Or just in general?
Yeah.
Have you read many books in your lifetime of Krishnamurti's?
Yes, but I hardly ever read a whole book completely.
Interesting.
I kind of read chapters here and there. Whatever I felt was important to my life, or when I was faced a problem, I read the chapter that was relating to that. And each time I've really found an answer, actually not in the book, because you cannot just deal with Krishnamurti's teachings by reading and saying it's interesting. You have to really apply it and observe what he's talking about in your own life.
And test it, right?
And test it out,
daily
yes.
life.
Otherwise it has no meaning whatsoever.
Because it's just a set of pointers, right?
Yes,
so if I
you can
point out a
say.
flower, it's up to you to go smell it or not. And it enriches your
Yes.
life.
Yes, but it's more difficult than just to smell a flower. For instance, if you look at fear or anger or whatever, you have to look very, depending on what it is, you have to look very, very deep. Not just at the idea, for instance, of fear, but at fear itself. And that's, I think, distinguishes him from many other teachers. Many great teachers deal with similar topics, like compassion, love, right relationship, discovering the eternal, things like that. Essential questions of living, basically.
Right.
But what I found in Kay's teachings is he basically went a step further, in the sense that let's give an example. For instance, if you speak about right relationship, some religions say love your neighbor, love yourself, and they point out the importance of self-discovery and all that. So they talk about it, and people are asked to do it or to believe it. And what is new, at least what I discovered was new or different in Krishnamurti's teachings, he goes beyond the ideas and the ideals about something. So for instance, let's take love. He doesn't say love your neighbor, love yourself, but he makes you discover what it really is.
And what it's not.
And what it is not, sometimes through what it is not, through negation. But it always comes to the final point where you have to be in direct contact with whatever that is, yourself. Not through an idea or through an ideal or a belief or something. And that is sometimes not so simple. For instance, if you take fear, you can say, well, don't be afraid, just live your life without fear. That's still an idea. Whereas, if you look at fear yourself, in action, when fear really appears, then then I think we can discover how fear comes about.
Exactly.
And that is a huge difference than just saying live without fear.
Right.
Then you just follow a concept or an idea, even if it's a good idea or a positive idea. It does not mean that we know what fear is. That's why with all these things, he goes beyond the idea of things. And he's going to the root of things. Is it fear, if it's relationship, and even, for instance, the eternal. He doesn't say, well, either believe you or don't believe it. You can speculate about it, you can talk about it, you can think it makes sense or doesn't make sense. All this has some meaning at some point, but it doesn't mean that you discovered what the eternal is. If you're just playing around with ideas. And it's interesting because a great deal of our life is just based on ideas. It's incredible.
Tradition is heavily built around ideas.
Yes, I would say so.
And that's such a dominant force in
Right,
most people's lives.
right. I mean, all ideas, even ideas in the present, can be ideas, or in the future. It's not only the past, but you can have great ideas about the future, what we can do, what we will do. And today, a lot of people visualize the future, which, you know, to a certain extent, in certain areas, might have some significance. But basically, if you visualize the future based on an idea, it's very, very limited.
Exactly.
Yeah. So.
It's still within the realm of time and thought.
Right. And that was basically our lives is based on. Very often we don't even realize it.
Where thinking is a dominant process.
Yes.
So because of the way we're brought up.
Right.
Thinking is always emphasized.
Right.
And it enters into many areas where it wasn't meant for. So it becomes like trying to brush your hair with a toothbrush.
Right.
It fails, basically.
Right. However, thought is very important too. One should not.
Absolutely, for its right place.
Right. That becomes a kind of slogan in Krishnamurti circle.
Well,
Use it in the right place.
Right. Well, but it can also be a pitfall, and it's something to be aware of.
Yes.
To think too little is also harmful.
Exactly.
If it's around, if
Exactly.
it's about subjects you need to think. I've paid big price for this.
Right.
In learning that, oh, wait a minute, I should have thought more.
That's right. And for instance, in business or in science, you know, thought is very important. But in the same time, there are moments where first you have to think through a problem completely. And then you can look at the whole thing. And then comes a moment when you can look at it without thought. But sometimes you need to prepare something with thought.
Yes, and also from the start, once the mind learns where thinking belongs and not, then as soon as it starts going that direction, it just stops itself because it knows that's not where it needs to go.
Right.
You know, it
Right.
inhibits itself
Right.
in some way, just out of intelligence, not out of pressure.
But also each problem and each situation is very different. So sometimes one has to find out oneself, well, where has thought its place and where not. You cannot just follow a slogan, well, thought has its place and is not. You have to find out each time where the right place is. But I think the difficulty is that because so many things are based on thinking, which is absolutely necessary, it's very difficult sometimes to make the distinction or create the border where can thought go and where not. It's not always so easy.
Well, is it like, okay, let's say you don't eat sugar and you don't eat meat and you don't eat preservatives or conservatives, as they say. Preservative has a different meaning in Europe. and you go shopping. So if you just change your diet, first time you go in the supermarket, you have to look everywhere to, can I eat this or can I not eat this? But after a while, you just go in the supermarket, you know what you can buy and what you can't buy. So this is a very practical thing. I'm just wondering if it's similar to this, because looking at my own life, it is not so difficult. It's not such a burden or effort to tell where thinking belongs and not, because it's kind of become, in a way, because it's like as soon as it starts going where it doesn't belong, then these alarms are raised, because you already feel that it's not right.
Can you give an example?
Image making, let's say somebody comes in a room and you had some experience from the past and you say, oh, this guy is this way, for example.
Right.
And then, but you know that in this relationship, as in every relationship, you have a responsibility to not make images. That's the basic form of, that's just basic responsibility in my opinion. And then you quiet down, you just become quiet and you see the person as they are now. Of course, if there's a practical situation involved, if they stole your money last time,
right,
or whatnot, that's different.
That's true, and sometimes these things might go together. You might see a person like this, who insulted you or whatever, with new eyes, and then you can create a new relationship with this person. Which doesn't mean that you might have to be aware of something that, if it's a dangerous person, you cannot just say, well, I ignore it.
Exactly.
Something very interesting happened to me when I was in Geneva, and it's kind of related to Krishnamurti, because people called me and they said, where is Krishnamurti now? Is he traveling? I knew he was traveling from Baku to Saanen, and so I didn't want to tell them. And because they felt very aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
And then, a few days later, I was in a place in Geneva where the library was, Krishnamurti Library. They knocked on the door and they were very aggressive. They came to me and said, tell me where Krishnamurti is now. You know, and we want to know. And I had a feeling, if I weren't going to tell them, they were going to either attack me or kill me or whatever. I felt it was a huge aggression, And so first I was I was really afraid, But then I tried to apply what Krishnamurti was teaching. So I looked him in the eyes, without any image, without anything, and at that moment I got an idea. I said, I'm going to tell you, but not in this room, but outside. So they were so astonished, they were basically disarmed. So I went outside on the street, they followed me, didn't do anything. And then I said, I will tell you around the corner. I knew there was a restaurant. I said, I will tell you after the corner. So they followed me again, and then after the corner was the restaurant. I went into the restaurant, and then they couldn't do anything. They disappeared. They were so furious, but I was saved in a way,
Right.
Without attacking them, without anything.
Where were they from?
I don't know, no idea. So I didn't have to give them the answer. So I'm just giving this example because through this perception, by seeing who they were, the right solution came. It was not my solution. My thinking would not have been possible to figure out, oh, I can go outside. Impossible,
Right, right.
I really didn't know what to do,
So
that was
an insight that came from understanding the problem.
To be kind of in deep contact with them, Some people say the observer is the observed, but there was no distance between them and me, so I could kind of feel where they're coming from,
Right.
But it was not through thinking, what shall I do, but it came out of this deep connection with them. It's difficult to describe, but
Yeah, and a lot of times, a lot of relationships are basically ruined because after a while, it's not a relationship between two people, but a relationship between two images,
Right.
which becomes mechanical because
Right.
then they know each other's buttons and how
Right.
they're going to react. If I say this, he's going to say that, especially like in marriages and stuff.
Right.
So once you step out of this,
Right.
and you suspend the image
Right.
through seeing its building blocks,
Right.
because it's built from thinking, so you quiet down the thought and it's not there anymore.
Right.
Then it affects the other person too.
Right.
Because suddenly you're
Right.
not behaving the way he expected you to behave.
Right. Right.
And suddenly there's even love.
Right.
Because when there's these images, love can't be, because
Right.
it's that you're dominated by this divisive process,
Right. Right.
which pushes away love.
Right.
But when you're quiet, then the love can be.
Right. Can be. Yeah. That's with all of life. I mean, I think not only in relationship with human beings, you know, with a flower, with nature, with basically everything. That makes really life very interesting. You know, every day. There's no. I'm never bored, for instance.
You never what?
Bored. There's so many
That's
people
right.
on board. I cannot believe it. You know, I cannot believe it. They don't know what to do with their lives. You know, even if they have no job, if they're retired, they have plenty of money, they're still bored. You know.
Yeah, it's like boredom doesn't exist in my vocabulary. You know?
Right. And I think that is because that was missing in their education. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they were not told how to really face life. You know, how to discover life. The main questions of life are not addressed in normal education. That's why I think what Kay pointed out in education is so important, and it could be applied in all the schools, not just in Krishnamurti schools, you know?
It's exactly the next topic
Yeah.
I was going to talk
Okay.
about, because you're a long-term educator yourself. So please tell us more about your impressions about what Krishnamurti proposes in terms of education.
Well, as I said, my understanding is that, you know, he brought into education the whole field of living, so that students learn how to deal with all questions of living, basically. How to understand themselves, the others, life, meaning of life, what they should do in life, success, non-success, competition, the whole functioning of society. And if these questions are addressed, then the whole life becomes different of these young people. You know, they approach life in a different way. Whatever they choose to do or not to do. And I think they would never be bored, for instance. But that means also that the teachers themselves are interested in these questions of living deeply. Not just ideas, but they really deal with these questions themselves, because they are students like the students themselves. There's no differentiation on that level. They have more knowledge, and so that is their function to make students discover some knowledge they might have. Even so, today, even on that level, it's a little bit different, because sometimes students have more knowledge than the teachers in some areas. So, so even on that level, there can be a kind of common discovery.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not even the main point. I think the main point is that on more essential questions of living, the teachers and students should, if they want to go deeper into these questions, not as ideas, but as real discoveries. Again, I think that's a huge difference.
Yeah, but there the challenge is to find teachers who are actually interested in that. Because I know, for example, in India, many foundations had trouble finding teachers who were actually interested in Krishnamurti's work.
Right?
Because
That's
there was
true.
a shortage of good teachers, so you had to just hire somebody. Even in America, it is, I think, somewhat like that. I met with a few teachers yesterday, and yeah, you wonder really. I think they don't have that much exposure to K. several of them have never heard of K before even they come here.
Right.
So they learn about it here, and then who's got the time, and so on. And I'm wondering. I mean, I even don't know if many of these teachers have even read things like On Education, Letters to Schools, 2-volume set, because I think this should almost be a mandatory reading for these teachers. And these books are very deep,
Right, and even if it's not mandatory, at least there should be, possibility for the teachers to take part in that.
Yeah.
I think
maybe
they would.
It is already. I don't know. I'm just an outsider.
Right, right. So in some schools they do.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes they are afraid not to want to impose a doctrine or so,
right.
which in fact it is not.
That's true. And the other question that came up yesterday in this meeting was that, let's say a teacher reads these two couple of books and is somewhat exposed to case teachings around education, but is that enough, or do they need to actually explore other areas of these teachings or of life itself? The question that came up was about practicality in terms of application in the classroom.
Right.
And there seemed that there isn't really, or there was a question of whether there's a seminar or something, a presentation they can get of how to apply these teachings in the classroom. Because these people, the teachers, they have to actually deal with very practical things.
Right.
If you throw some, what seems to be an abstract set of teachings, I don't think they are. I think they're very practical.
Right.
Then they might not know what to do with it.
Right. I've heard there are now some teacher training classes in Borkwood and also India.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know here. And I think that's a very good initiative. It should be really kind of teacher training classes, because it doesn't happen overnight. Even so, if some teachers just might read some books, I think that, or watch videos or whatever, it will help a lot. But I think it's important that these questions are shared and discussed and experimented. I have seen some amazing classes in Borkwood and in India with teachers who were deeply interested in Krishnamurti, and where it made a huge difference. The whole approach was totally different, and they were very creative teachers. And I wrote a book about it. I interviewed some teachers, especially in India, and I was really very, very impressed to see what can be done if teachers are interested in Krishnamurti's teachings. It can revolutionize a whole school.
Have you seen Paul Herder's book?
No. I've seen it, but I didn't read it yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
I have it here.
Okay.
But it seems to be quite good. Is your book available still?
I think it's out of print. Even I don't have any copy anymore.
Why don't you publish it, do self-publishing,
Yeah.
put it on Amazon?
The moment I have time, I would do that, yeah.
So what else? Did you have any direct contacts with Kay? Did you ever have any one-to-ones or small group dialogues?
Well, the most important meeting I had with him was, it was a private interview. I asked him a question that bothered me at the time. And I will never forget that, because it was so...
Can you describe the whole thing from the moment you walked in the room?
Okay. First there was a meeting with young people only. It was in Switzerland, in his chalet where he lived. Tanek, yes. And at the end I asked him if he had time for a question. And he said, "Sorry, I'm very busy, but can you come tomorrow?" And then I said, "Unfortunately not, because I have to leave this evening or early tomorrow morning, I don't remember." And then immediately he said, "What's the question?" "No more, I don't have time, what's the question?" And that's another example, not based on an idea. He could have said, "Well, I have my work to do." No, he has seen it and acted immediately. And then I've seen there was somebody else in the room, so I didn't want to start. And this person was behind Krishnamurti. So I saw this person. And the moment he saw that I have seen him, instantly he turned around and said, "Goodbye. Goodbye, sir."
Mm-hmm.
That's another example, not based on thought, but pure observation. And that's, that's a new thing. It's based on observation and not on an idea or thought.
Immediate action.
Immediate action. This direct observation brings immediate action. So then I asked him the question. It was something I didn't understand.
You were sitting or you were standing?
No, we were standing. We were standing, yeah.
So the whole thing was standing?
Yes, yes. And then he asked me some counter questions. And
what was your question? Do you care to share it?
I cannot share the
question. Too personal.
Too personal. It was something that I didn't understand. It was a phenomenon that I didn't understand. So I explained to him. And it had an effect on my life. So without understanding, I thought I could not deal with this question. So I explained to him. And he asked counter questions. But the counter question he asked showed to me that he didn't understand the question. So I said, "Sir, I don't think I made myself clear." And he said, "Explain again."
Was this in French or in German?
I think it was in French.
English?
I think it was in French, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I explained again. And then, during the second explanation, something extraordinary happened. I had the feeling I didn't speak to any, let's say, regular person anymore, like it was before. I suddenly felt he was not there anymore. Not physically, but he was just a mirror, and I had the feeling I speak with
open space.
Completely open space. And that changed actually my approach to the question. I presented it in a totally different way. And at the same time, it forced me to look in myself. What's the problem I really have? So anyway, then I finished the presentation. And then I had the impression that he really understood. Mm-hmm. Then again he asked counter questions. Why do I look at this like this? Etc., etc. And they were very good questions, I must say. But they didn't help me at all. At all.
You mean the answers he gave?
No, he didn't answer.
He
didn't answer. He only asked questions so that I looked into this problem myself, which I did, but it didn't help me. So I told him, "Sir,
it's not helpful."
So, sir, it just doesn't help me. Honestly, it doesn't help me. And he didn't say a word. Any psychologist would try to convince you. He can explain to you. He can make you discover something or not. Nothing. He was not trying to make his point, to show that he can ask even better questions so that he can help me. Nothing. He didn't do anything. He didn't say anything anymore.
Just stood there quietly.
Completely quietly. And then I didn't know what to do because I knew it was not helping me.
Was he looking at you?
Yeah, he was looking at me, I was looking at him. And then I said, "Sir, I have to go because it doesn't help me." Again, he didn't try to, nothing.
Convince you to stay?
Nothing. So he said goodbye, very friendly, and I left, but I was shivering. Shivering, is that the right word?
Mm-hmm.
Because my problem was not resolved. I said, well, now I went to Krishnamurti, even there's no solution. So I was completely desperate, But I knew he couldn't help me neither. So I went to the door there. And at the door, when I opened the door, I looked backwards. And he was still standing there, without any movement. He was just looking at me. And I was looking at him, without words. Nobody tried to say anything, nothing. And at that moment, it was incredible. I I saw through him like, it was like a window through eternity. Absolutely beautiful kind of gold and green color. And it was just, I was just in awe, you know, I just couldn't say anything. And then after a while, he came to me, took my hand, and gave me the answer. He didn't really answer the question, but he said what I should not do, you know. And that basically
untangled it.
Untangled the whole problem, yes. Yeah. So.
When you say green and yellow, you mean actually we're seeing things actually?
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
Like energy or whatnot.
I wouldn't say energy, it was just a field of very quiet, clear, something real, not something, you know, illusory at all.
When you were looking at him, you mean?
Yeah, basically through his eyes, you know, I could see his eyes were kind of like the windows that opened through a totally different dimension, which was real.
Yeah, and he was standing next to the window. I mean, you could see the light was reflecting in his eyes.
It was no. It was
enclosed room.
Yes, enclosed room. Yes, okay. Yeah. So anyway, that was very important meeting for me. I just think it's something. If you compare it to all the other teachings, it is something that really is totally different in essence. Some areas, you know, there are comparisons, and I think it's really teachings for our times, because problems are getting worse and worse in basically all areas: environment, conflicts among people and nations, inner problems, inner confusion. And I think there is no other really radical way to bring a deep change than through these teachings, I think. Because they go to the root of today's problems. The problem is they are not so easy to understand, because we are immediately translating it to other ideas instead of looking at what he's pointing out.
Most people that I have met who say that it's not so easy to understand haven't really tried.
Yes.
Because I think we were talking about this education subject and teachers earlier. As I also mentioned in this discussion we were having, I think Krishnamurti's teachings is like any other subject, like math or science. It needs to be studied. You cannot understand math through just picking up a few chapters here and there.
Right.
You need to read certain textbooks from cover to cover. And with regards to K's teachings, as you said, you need to test it out in daily life. So it's not something you can pick up from some books. And this takes work. Just like
absolutely
anything else, any other subject, if you want to understand it, takes work. Of course, it's very rewarding because it opens a lot of doors.
Right. That's why it's difficult, because it's work. It's not just, you know, assimilating a new idea.
Exactly. Pop psychology.
Yes. When it's really to look into all these things he's pointing out.
Right, and then we were talking with Friedrich some time ago about this subject as well, and you know, what is it that prevents some people from absorbing this? And one of the things that came out was that perhaps it's because the self is so strong, because one of the core parts of K's teaching, as I understand it, is the ending of the self. But the self wants all kinds of tricky ways to give itself continuity. And this suddenly challenges that. So that could also be a factor.
Right. But also because I think the main reason is we are not really educated to look at things. Not only outside, maybe outside to a certain point, but also inside. All education is based on accumulation of ideas and knowledge. So for instance, if you study psychology, if it's Jung or Freud or new psychologists, etc., is assimilating these ideas. They're still ideas. And you deal with your students or with your patients through ideas. And very rarely are we compelled to really get into contact with who we are and who the other person is. And that is, it's our conditioning, because we have never been educated differently. That's why it's, in a way, it's difficult.
But also
the fact itself is not so easy, not so difficult.
Right, right. I agree with you. And Kay himself said that certain cultures can understand him easier.
Yes.
Because if you take I think Persian culture is one of them. Because if you go in the history, you have people like Rumi and so on.
Right.
Who are very much, it's not that different actually from what Kay is saying, but different, of course, Kay says it in a much more clear modern way. They couldn't say it so clearly because they would get killed in that day and age. So you had to say it indirectly through the poems and so on. So I don't think that Kay's teaching is so radical in its essence, but nevertheless, of course, the language and all that is very modern and very clear. But yes, it's true that background helps.
Background helps, and if people in the young age are kind of invited to
entertain these ideas.
Yes.
Which is what happened to us as children. You know, we read.
And not only entertain ideas, but to really look into these things.
Well, that's entertaining ideas is a fancy way of saying.
Okay. Okay. For instance, fear is a very interesting example, and I remember once in Sarnen that was so interesting. I will never forget that. He asked the people in the tent to imagine that they were in a forest and that suddenly an unknown animal attacks them. And he asked them, what are you going to do? And it was so interesting. For the whole hour or so, people gave all kind of ideas. A woman said, I will love the animal, then he's not going to attack me. Kay said, well, madam, you don't know what love is.
So he'll eat you.
The other said, I'm jumping away. He said, well, it's too late, he's going to attack you, you know. Whatever we all said were basically answers from thought. You know, even if you say it's love, it's still based on a thought, you know. Either I run away, or I thinking, or I attack him, or I jump, or I whatever. All the answers were based on a thought or an idea. And this whole thing, according to my understanding, is don't base everything on ideas but on observation. And the whole point with this animal was, can we be in direct contact with this animal? And then out of that see what happens. And that is so different than acting based on an idea. That's why, in a way, I think it's really radical.
Right. I agree with you that.
And something interesting happened at the end. He gave the answer. You know what to do. I don't remember the exact wording. It doesn't matter. But something like, you know, when you are in direct contact with this animal, without the self, without an image and all that, out of this moment you will know what to do. And then when he came next day, he asked the same question, and the person repeated exactly the answer that Kay gave, which again was just an idea. And he said, you're just repeating what the chap told you the day before. And he brushed it away.
So, Mr. Brugger, any other thing to share with our viewers tonight?
No, I think that's...
How does it feel to be so multicultural? You're originally Swiss, but living in the US. Do you think of going back to Switzerland someday? Or do you see yourself living here your whole life?
I don't know. For the moment, I have no intention to return. go back occasionally, but.
What made you make the move to the U.S.? Was it the weather, which I can fully understand?
No, it was my interest in Krishnamurti, and I just had the feeling that I had something to do here, so.
Aspiration.
And then I like the people here, and the nature, and the climate, and everything. So.
Krishnamurti came to Ohio Retreat, right? Before it was built. He came on his hill, right, and said something.
Yeah, apparently he was often here because friends of his built his house.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah,
oh.
yeah. Mr. and Mrs. Zolk, you know.
Okay.
And he was on the board of the trust. I think it was called the Star of the East Foundation or trust or something.
Way early.
Way early, yes. Then apparently Annie Besant, she put him as president of the Happy Valley School. Mm-hmm. And apparently he was president for 30 years.
How old is this house?
It has been built in the early 40s.
40s.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know that, when Krishnamurti still was alive, Friedrich Goyer wanted to buy it. And he asked Kay if they should buy it. And Krishnamurti first said, for what? And then Goy didn't know, guest house or whatever. And then Krishnamurti wanted to walk around. And he said, yes, we should buy it. And then apparently Mr. Goy said, well, in some rooms that doesn't seem to be good energy. Is there a reason not to buy? And Krishnamurti said, no, you just walk around 3 times and it will be changed.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And he said something
but they didn't
about
buy
this,
it. But they didn't buy it.
He said something about this hill. He said something positive about this hill.
Did I don't know?
Remember? You told me that he stood here and he said, this is what did he say? Some positive remark about this hill.
This I don't remember.
Anyway.
But independently of what he said, it is a remarkable hill.
Yeah.
Yeah. Recently there was a guest here, he said this is the best energy in the whole town, in the whole valley. And it's true, a lot of people feel, the moment they come up the hill, they feel something really very special here.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've done a tremendous job of building what's here in terms of the retreat.
Well, but the energy was already here. So.
Your attention to detail has been amazing. And you've come a long way from that vision you had, which I knew more than 20 years ago, to what you have here, which is a world-class organization. What is it theoretically? Ohio Retreat is
it's a non-profit organization.
Non-profit organization. So, congratulations, keep up the good work.
Yeah. I still have in mind that later on we should have some college level classes here.
Okay. And you want to build an amphitheater?
Yeah, that's a smaller project. Yeah.
And you're a master of fundraising.
Not really. Actually not. Actually not. Actually, I don't like it.
I know, but you always
I don't like it.
Have to be dealing with it.
Yeah, right.
Because being a non-profit, you always rely on donations.
Right.
Swiss
But that's the
call.
only thing actually I don't like, fundraising. So.
I don't think anybody likes it. Thank you.
Anyway,
Thank
you're welcome.
you.
So.